So I want to talk about the killing of Michael Reinoehl. It was an extrajudicial killing. It seems to be all the evidence appears to be the case. And it was on September 3rd, Michael Reinoehl, who was 48 years old, he was shot and killed by a federal fugitive task force led by the U.S. Marshals Service outside an apartment complex in Lacey, Washington. And Reinoehl's killing came several hours after he had been charged with the murder of Erin J. Danielson, a Trump supporter, a right-wing vigilante, at a protest in Portland, Oregon on August 29th. I'm going to show you a few clips that have come out just recently. In the World Socialist Web article, it said Reinoehl's death was a state-sanctioned killing carried out with the support of the Justice Department and the White House. Just minutes before Reinoehl's death was announced, President Donald Trump tweeted a demand that the police take action to apprehend Danielson's killer. Quote, "Do your job and do it fast. Everybody knows who this thug is," end quote, Trump declared.
In Washington state, a witness to last week's police killing of Michael Reinoehl says the 48-year-old anti-fascist activist did not appear to have a gun and was not threatening officers before he was killed in a hail of police gunfire. The witness, Nathaniel Dingus, says Reinoehl was clutching his phone and eating candy outside an apartment complex September 3rd when officers in two unmarked cars converged on him. Dingus says the officers never announced themselves or gave commands before opening fire. The officers were serving an arrest warrant for Reinoehl over the shooting death of Erin Danielson, a member of the far-right Patriot Prayer Group who was killed during a protest in Portland August 29th. President Trump's defending the fatal police shooting of Portland anti-fascist activist Michael Reinoehl as retribution after he was accused of killing a far-right Trump supporter. Trump's remarks to Fox News came after a witness said Reinoehl did not appear to have a gun and was not threatening officers who never announced themselves or gave commands before killing him in a hail of gunfire September 3rd.
This guy was a violent criminal. A lot of them out there. And the U.S. Marshals killed him. And I will tell you something, that's the way it has to be. There has to be retribution.
Apparently, Attorney General William Barr said in a press release posted on the Justice Department's website that the killing of a quote, admitted Antifa member, end quote, was, quote, a significant accomplishment in the ongoing effort to restore law and order, end quote. Now, you know that regularly Trump likes to post law and order on his Twitter page, and really what that means is it's a dog whistle to the right, that he is clamping down on these communists, and it's all red baiting, and he puts everybody, including the Democratic Party, which is laughable, he puts them all in the communist, socialist bin. In his July 4th speech, he actually referred to anybody on the left that's protesting who's a Black Lives Matter protester or is anti-fascist. He says that they are basically not Americans. So, you know, this killing of Michael Reinoehl is very, very disturbing in that, you know, there hasn't even been any sort of outcry by the Democratic Party about this. They basically hate the left, the real left, not the pretend left that people refer to the Democratic Party, corporate Democrats as the left, which is laughable. But the Democratic Party, corporate Democrats, and people who love the corporate Democrats hate the left, the real left, as much as Donald Trump does. So they really haven't said much about this. And by the way, anybody who's crying out about this too needs to remember that there is the National Authorization Defense Act actually allows for Americans to be detained without trial, without counsel, indefinitely, and also can be assassinated as well. For example, there are already 2 Americans, Anwar al-Awlaki and his son, a 16-year-old son, were both assassinated by drones. They're American citizens. There was no trial. And speaking of no trial, I mean, basically every single day, and has been for 20 years or so, there's been drone killings, which you could call extrajudicial killings because there is no trial. They've basically just decided. Obama used to have a kill list on Tuesdays, and he used to present this kill list, and they would go and assassinate those people by drones. And there were 90% of the people who were killed by those drone bombings overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., were civilians. They don't even count that under Trump's administration. They don't even count the civilians anymore, I don't think. Well, that's what the last I heard of it. Even though Brian Schatz was saying that his Republican senators that he knows of have problems with extrajudicial killings, That's not true, really. I mean, he said extrajudicial killings overseas. What is that? Other countries doing that to citizens, or is it the United States? I'm not sure. He didn't really elaborate. And, the World Socialist Web article said that the methods used by the Pinochet dictatorship in Chile, snatch squads, disappearances and extrajudicial murders of political opponents, are appearing in the United States. Reinoehl had been active in nightly protests against police violence in Portland. He had expressed committed opposition to racism and fascism and sympathy for Antifa, and had made clear that he was not a member of any such organization. And I noticed that the mainstream the corporate media was saying that he said he was 100% Antifa. Well, no. I heard him say he was 100% anti-fascist. That's not the same thing. And by the way, I wish that the corporate media and people like Trump would stop making out as if Antifa is some sort of formal organization. I can call myself Antifa if I wanted to. I'm anti-fascist. It doesn't have a membership card, and anybody can say they're anti-fascist. Agents provocateurs can pretend to be Antifa. The FBI can pretend to be Antifa and set cars on fire and overturn things if they want to. Anybody can pretend to be Antifa. That's the nature of the internet now. Anybody can pretend to be a Bernie Sanders supporter and be, sort of saying misogynist things to different people, like they like to make out the Bernie bros were. Anybody can say anything on the internet now and say they're this and that. And that's how it is now. It says records unsealed on Friday show that Danielson, a member of the far-right Patriot Prayer Organization, had been armed with a can of bear mace, a retractable metal baton, and a handgun in a holster on his hip when he was shot. The killing took place in the context of a provocation by pro-Trump elements who drove pickup trucks through downtown Portland and shot paintballs and pepper spray and engaged in fistfights with anti-police violence protesters. And by the way, if you've seen my video from about a week or so ago, where Portland residents talk about how far-right members regularly have been going to Portland and terrorizing the residents there. This has been going on for years now. So it's not something recent that's happened. In Reinoehl's, this is the guy who was assassinated basically by the sheriffs on Trump's order, really. In Reinoehl's interview with Vice News, Reinoehl said that he had not turned himself in to the police because he believed they were working with far-right groups and that he could not be safe in their custody. Quote, "They're out hunting me," end quote, he said. Quote, "There's nightly posts of the hunt and where they're going to be hunting. They made a post saying the deer are going to feel lucky this year because it's open season on Michael right now," end quote. And if you recall, the Rittenhouse, who was the far-right child, basically, who was carrying an assault weapon in Kenosha, who killed 2 unarmed protesters, and he had his hands up in front of the police. They just ignored him. He went home and slept in his own bed in Illinois, not because he didn't live in Portland. He drove there. He didn't live in Kenosha. And so he spent the night in his own bed, and then he handed himself in the next day. That's how they treat the far right, the police, because pretty much they're in cahoots with the far right. They protect the far right, and the far right is not really a threat to them because they're all pretty much white supremacists. So the left, the real left, though, is a threat to not only the Republicans, because it threatens to gather steam and challenge their capitalist, rapacious, imperialist, white supremacist, patriarchal system, and also the Democrats, the corporate Democrats, are frightened of that as well. So you're not really going to hear much about Michael Reinoehl and this extrajudicial killing. You're not going to hear much about that at all because they really don't care. And that really was just, basically, there was a few things about this that Donald Trump was doing. He was trying to show his base that he's really serious about knocking off leftists, as he mentioned in his July 4th speech. He's really serious about them being not Americans and that they need to be rounded up. And they can be right now under the NDAA, as I mentioned. So he's serious about that. He's serious. He wants to let his base know that he's quite happy to just send, like an emperor putting his thumbs up, going out and ordering a killing. He's quite happy to do that, and he wanted to demonstrate to them, as an example, make Michael Reinoehl an example of what he's going to do to the left, to the real left, even though he pretends that the Democratic parties are part of this whole socialist communist thing, which is just the biggest joke there is. But that's what he's trying to tell his base, and he used this poor man as an example. There was no trial. There was no trial for Michael Reinoehl, no sort of presumption of innocence until proven guilty. It was just a straight-out assassination, basically. Straight-out execution. The far right into Donald Trump, Rittenhouse, the boy who killed those two unarmed protesters in Kenosha, he is a hero, and any on the left are scumbags and animals and all these sort of names that he likes to call them. I mean, it's just disgusting, really. Even Fox News called Rittenhouse a hero. And Biden has also, been going on about how he's going to, sort of stop looters and all this kind of thing. He hasn't really addressed the issue and what's actually going on there. It's all about now Biden trying to pretend to be tougher than Donald Trump. This is what they do. Like Biden has said he's going to increase military spending, as if it isn't insane enough as it is. That's what he's going to do. He's trying to outflank Donald Trump from the right with his effing military spending. As historian Edward B. Westerman notes, that under Germany's Nazi regime, as well as the preceding Weimar Republic, the phrase, quote, shot while trying to escape, end quote, was frequently used, quote, to describe the killing of the regime's putative political and racial enemies, end quote. He explains that, quote, in many cases, the phrase normalized the act of murder by providing a veneer of procedural legality that served as both a euphemism and a justification for murder, end quote. And that's what they always say every time. They used to say that, about the Black Panthers, when they weren't trying to escape or draw a gun on anybody or go for their weapon, and they just would basically murder them. This is what they always say when they actually murder someone. He was going for a knife, he was going for a gun, yada, yada, yada. They always use that excuse. And it turns out that it's never the case. I mean, this guy, when they went to shoot him, Michael Reinoehl, he was basically eating a gummy snake and talking on his cell phone. And they just jumped out of the car and didn't even announce themselves, according to a witness who, his name escapes me right now, but the witness has been a pastor or something for 17 years, and he said they didn't announce themselves, they just started shooting. And then they stopped for a moment, and then they started shooting again. But basically, he had nowhere to go, and they just executed him. That's according to this witness. William Barr, the dodgy Attorney General, said that apparently he attempted to escape arrest and produced a firearm. Well, that's not what the witness says. The witnesses did not say that he had nothing, and they basically just jumped out of the car and killed him. The World Socialist Web article said, his death was the intended outcome of an operation meant to intimidate others opposed to police violence and set a precedent for violent state attacks on workers coming into struggle against mass unemployment and the ruling class's homicidal back to work and back to school drives in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. This is just another example of, just like they're using Julian Assange as an example, even like Panetta was actually interviewed and basically said that Julian Assange was being used as an example, so no one will ever do that again. They actually admitted it. And this is another, this is what they're doing, these various examples to suppress people, to stop people from acting against anti-democratic laws and killings of black people, etc. These are all meant as examples to deter people from acting. He was saying such claims of this going for a gun kind of thing or whatever that they use as an excuse to kill people. Such claims have been used to whitewash the killing of political opponents, including FBI's efforts to destroy the left-wing Black Panther Party in the 1960s and 1970s. Bobby Hutton, the treasurer of the Black Panthers, was killed in a shootout with the with the Oakland, California police in 1968. Stripped to his pants and attempting to surrender, the 17-year-old Hutton was shot and killed by police who claimed he had attempted to flee.
Bobby Hutton was murdered. Bobby Hutton's body was a house down. They said he'd come out with a gun, and they had floodlights on the place. If he'd had a gun, they'd have shot him on the front steps. Now, his body was down, then the fire trucks come along. They washed blood away, of course. But they literally murdered Bobby Hutton and shot and wounded Eldridge Cleaver and Warren, these other men. This is what the police department has done. After they've set the house on fire, the fire department set the house on fire, put tear gas in the place, etc., shot the place all up. Fellows came out of the place with their hands in the air.
It is my opinion that this is the latest in a series of attempts to liquidate the leadership of the Black Panther Party. At first, they moved against Huey P. Newton, Minister of Defense, and they are well advanced in framing Bobby Seale, the chairman. And now, for the first time, they have moved directly against me, shooting me and attempting to kill me. I think this is a calculated plan that has been carried out.
So that's an age-old white supremacist thing that, sort of a police strategy and excuse they've got going there, and they just continue to use it. Michael Reinoehl, in his interview with Vice, I recall him saying that he actually felt like he was threatened, that it looked like his friend, who's a person of color, was being threatened, and he felt like that Danielson was going to kill his friend, and therefore he did that. He shot him in self-defense. Well, we'll never really know now, because Trump is in his emperor style. He thinks he's so tough that he can just order killings of Soleimani and people and just order, missile strikes, and makes him feel very manly or whatever. We'll never know what happened, really, because there will be no trial, because Trump has become judge, jury, and executioner, basically.
And they immediately raised their hands, and the Seattle police, who, by the way, could do a great job if they were let to do their job, but they're not. They're not. And as you know, in Portland the other day, we had to send in the U.S. Marshals. A man who's a bad guy, shot somebody right in the middle of the street, who they say was a very fine young man, shot him, killed him. Just shot him like it was on television. 2.5 days, nothing happened. I said, what's going on? We sent in the U.S. Marshals. It was taken care of in 15 minutes, okay? 15 minutes.
And this, I think we can say, behold the future, because if Trump gets in again, I'd say that this is going to be more and more a frequent occurrence, and he's going to feel quite entitled to continue on killing people in this manner without trial. And, this is as I've mentioned before, and as other people have mentioned, this is the burgeoning American fascism.